How safe do you feel? I mean, you got the cops to protect you, right? You got the military too, right? You sure? Because yesterday, and I'm shocked more people aren't talking about this, dual citizen of Lebanon and America who openly identified as Palestinian went into the Air National Guard to, according to the indictment, to get military weapons training. He was just charged with 9 counts related to terrorism yesterday. Now, he had already been charged with detonating pipe bombs targeting Jewish facilities, but now in this superseding indictment, it turns out he lied about his loyalty to the United States. He's being charged with false statements in an attempt to obtain a top secret security clearance, among other things. Keep in mind, this is a U.S. service member that was in fact granted a security clearance review. He lied through 3 separate interviews before they caught him, all the while openly supporting and expressing support for Lebanon, Hezbollah, and Hamas. Look, here, page 4 of his indictment. Hamad, his name, he told others that despite joining the Air Force, he was still more loyal to Palestine and Lebanon than the United States. On his social media, he posted multiple times things like this, quote, "Been toting that case since I was a boy," pictures of him as a kid, "don't play with me." He also said, "All right, y'all say a prayer with me. Inshallah, one day each bullet in this kisses the foreheads of the Zionist oppressor. Amen," which is amen. This guy was a terrorist enlisted in our military with a pending security clearance and access to weapons. This is a real problem that's been around for a while, and it's not being addressed. I hope Pete Hegseth is on it after this. But I'm just going to come out and say it because our intel community has, and our military and all of politics, has basically been so wrung out on DEI training that they're afraid to even suggest anyone with radical Muslim views might actually carry out action on radical Muslim views. Now, going back to the 90s, Ali Muhammad, the former U.S. Army sergeant, pled guilty in 2000 to conspiracy charges related to al-Qaeda's 1998 U.S. embassy bombing in Africa. Semi Osman, U.S. Army, convicted in 2002 on terrorism charges for hosting a terrorist training camp on his own property shortly after converting to Islam. Jeffrey Battle, U.S. Army Reserves, convicted in 2003 while trying to join al-Qaeda. Hassan Abu Jihad, U.S. Navy, converted to Islam in 1995, was charged in 2002 and convicted in 2008 with leaking classified information to al-Qaeda. Bryant Vinnest, U.S. Army, for a few weeks. After converting to Islam in 2004, he provided detailed information about New York's train system in an attempt to facilitate terrorist attacks. He pled guilty in 2009. You remember Fort Hood? Major Hassan? That guy killed 12 soldiers, 1 civilian, and an unborn child, injuring 32 more on a military base. His motives were driven by radical Islam. He's currently on death row, thank God. The FBI actually knew he had communicated with Anwar al-Awlaki, a Yemen-based al-Qaeda cleric, before the shooting, too. And yet, after that, even after that, Obama, on multiple occasions, refused to acknowledge radical Islam.
There's no magic to the phrase radical Islam. It's a political talking point. There's not been a moment in my 7.5 years as president where we have not been able to pursue a strategy because we didn't use the label radical Islam.
But even after a U.S. Army major murdered fellow soldiers, we still didn't root out this problem. Paul Rockwood, 2010, U.S. Navy, who converted to Islam in 2001, created a hit list of U.S. targets for assassinations and bombings after attending an Islamic center in Virginia. Tons of examples here. Cole Bridges ended up pleading guilty for terrorism. Ethan Melzer gave information to al-Qaeda affiliates about troop locations and movements in Afghanistan. Remember this guy, Shamsud Din Jabbar, Army? He was the one who just drove a vehicle through the New Orleans Mardi Gras party and had an ISIS flag. And now we see this stuff yesterday. I list all these names because there's a fact pattern here. But anytime someone says the truth, people get very uncomfortable. But there is a problem with radicalized Muslims in our military and some in our culture. But there are instances not just in the military. 1, 2 people, though, they go into the military, they get military training, like our soldiers. One guy that we know about, we just said, started a training camp afterwards. But how many more unknowns are there? Because beyond the military, we have the Detroit sleeper cell, where 4 Middle Eastern men were accused of forming a terror plot cell, plotting an attack on Disneyland. Their case was actually overturned over evidence handling errors, but remains super controversial. The Buffalo Six traveled to an al-Qaeda training camp in Afghanistan in 2001, before 9/11, pled guilty to material support for terrorism. We've had Hezbollah operatives arrested on a number of occasions in recent years, ongoing investigations on Iranian sleeper cells, some allegations that they're even serving in our government, terrorist cells in Los Angeles. Again, these are the ones we know about. You know how many we don't? You know how many terrorist attacks are thwarted on a daily basis across this nation that we will never know about because they remain classified? I'll give you a hint. It's not zero every day. Folks, we are living in a dangerous time, but there's a bunch of people out there who either refuse to admit it or actively impede sensible investigations into these things out of political correctness. And that's my concern here, because our law enforcement, they're comprised of good men and women, same with our intelligence communities, and they have to be right 100% of the time. 1 million out of 1 million times, they have to do everything right. One terrorist has to get one thing right, one time out of one of those million times, for you to lose a mother, a father, a brother, a sister, or a child, or in the case of 9/11, 3,000 of them. So when I hear people complaining about Trump smoking 74 terrorist leaders who were planning attacks on U.S. soil, I ask them, whose side are you on? And get the hell out of my country. I joined the military to go have that fight on their shoulders, not ours. And yet we allow it to exist here under this bubble of political correctness. And like all these people I just named were known to the FBI and our intelligence community for a very long time before actions were taken, and sometimes got away with killing Americans because actions were not taken soon enough, like Major Hassan specifically. But I think the larger issue here, and we need to examine, is the common denominator to at least this section of these crimes, which is Islam. Given the global experience, especially in the EU, seems to be acting in many cases like a political ideology. It's masquerading as a religion. The vast majority of Muslims practice that religion peacefully. However, a not insignificant percentage of that religion is not compatible with Western ideology. And that should be considered when we're granting security clearances to people in our military. I know, here comes a bunch of hate from a bunch of people, but let's get serious here. If you think I'm wrong, go back and listen to the first half of this monologue again. I've said this before. Every country where Muslims are the minority, they scream for minority rights, and most of them accommodate. Every country, though, where Muslims are in the majority, there are no minority rights. Show me where I'm wrong. You can't. So with that as your baseline, what are we going to do to root out this problem in America, especially in secret areas of our military? Maybe we should be a little bit more vigilant and a lot less concerned about who's offended. These are the people who are caught. Again, how many weren't? How many people have been feeding sensitive classified information to terrorist cells? For how long? We don't know. But we do know that this keeps happening. Sometimes it's even known about, and we do nothing because we're afraid of being accused of some bias, and then people die. I, for one, am willing to offend some people to keep us safe. Stay strapped, America.
He loves the Constitution. He fights for what's right. He hates the bad guys. He's a freedom warrior. He's your freedom warrior. Watch Carl Higbie every weekday on Newsmax.